exciting part of today's event, the valedictory session of third edition of Deccan Dialogue. This is the last session, but remember friends, I promise this is going to be an everlasting impression that creates, because on many of us with all these distinguished guests in this session. In this session, we have Professor Milind Soni, Area Leader, Professor in Operations Management and Deputy Dean, Indian School of Business, Honorable Minister for Housing and Urban Affairs, Civil Aviation, and Minister of State, Commerce and Industry, Shri Hardeep Singh Puri, and Shri C. Rajshekhar, OSD States Division, Ministry of External Affairs, Government of India, and Kumar Guru, Director External Relations, ISB. Now, I invite Professor Milind Soni for his remarks.
Thank you, Sandeep. Glad to be here in the valedictory session itself. I begin, I would like to welcome all our guests. So that is Shri Hardeep Singh Puri, G, Honorable Minister of Housing and Urban Affairs, Civil Aviation and Commerce and Industry, Government of India. Ambassador Shri C. Rajshekhar Ji, IFS, OSD States, Ministry of External Affairs in the Government of India. And my colleagues, of course, Kumar Guru and Sandeep, who are in charge of the show here, and all the other colleagues and friends and those sitting in the audience. Right? So first and foremost, on behalf of everyone at the Indian School of Business, let me begin by wishing you all a very happy Diwali. And of course, I also want to join in welcoming you to this valedictory session of the third edition of Deccan Dialogues. Now, as this third edition comes to a closure, I would like to take this opportunity to remind us about this whole idea of promoting exchange of ideas between policymakers, business leaders, academics, and society at large itself, right? And the roles that institutions like ISB play in this space, and in particular platforms such as this, the Deccan Dialogues, which provide an excellent opportunity for us to reflect upon and learn from our past achievements, but also to facilitate, ideas and about thought leadership and how do you form policy and how do you, inform policy and take it through into the future itself, right? So I do want to, commend the organizing committee for, bringing us all together in order to, and on this platform in order to exchange these ideas. Now, let me take a brief moment and talk a little bit about, our journey at ISB, which I believe in itself is an excellent example of visionary entrepreneurs, academics, and business leaders coming together to build this, research-driven management education institution in India. And I mean, just to kind of, reiterate what our late Prime Minister, Shri Atal Bihari Vajpayee Ji said, referring to ISB as the Rashtra Dakshina by the Indian industry, right? I mean, nothing is truer than what he actually said, because this was a combined effort of, so many folks coming in together in order to form this institution. But today, if I look at ISB, ISB is transforming from being just an entrepreneurial idea into becoming a premier management research institution in this country. And in the short span of 2 decades, ISB has made a name for itself in management education globally, right? And that I think is an incredible feat to achieve in such a short span of time. And today our programs, all of them rank amongst the best globally, while we still await for accreditation and recognition from Indian institutions, right? We're still, trying to work our way through the system. We've already achieved accreditation from global bodies, so which is, a lot to say for a young institution like ours. And we do hope that, in the near future, we will be able to do the same with our Indian counterparts, right? But that's all about our teaching and what, and management education itself. But what I think is relatively, unknown up until now, and which is now beginning to become much more visible, is our research output, right? And our ability to actually build management research in this part of the world. And ISB's faculty, I mean, just as a case in point, routinely engages with state and central government agencies, policymakers, business houses, not-for-profit organizations on very high impact projects, right? And such work has steadily increased over the years, and we are glad that we are contributing in very significant ways both to the local, national, and global economy, both through the work that we do, the thought leadership that we bring to bear, and then and do this in a very rigorous way. As with any academic institution that prides itself with a research-driven faculty, our faculty are encouraged to publish their work in some of the top academic outlets globally, and our faculty do that fairly routinely. And we probably are the only management institution in the country that rank globally for research, particularly management research, in rankings that matter to us, right, as academics, because we are very focused on top quality outlets, and ISB definitely is one of the few management institutions that has very routinely had its faculty publishing those journals. Now, why do I say this, right, and why does this matter, right? So ISB, as an example, right, I mean, thus far points to two very crucial issues in my mind. One, it's a beacon of an entrepreneurial effort coming to fruition, and I think it's a great example that encourages entrepreneurship in our country, particularly in the education space itself, right? And the second thing that I think which comes to mind once you start looking at ISB and the kind of work that is getting done over here is the ability for ISB to connect with policymakers, with businesses in the country, outside the country, with government agencies and society at large, right, in order to bring in research-driven thought into and management practices that are of global standards, right? And I think that is what is going to eventually make ISB the place to go for thought leadership, for management research, and also will provide ISB the opportunity to consolidate its position as the institute of eminence in management research and education, right? And we've worked very hard over the years to try to get to this place, and a lot still needs to be done, but I think there are great opportunities ahead of us in order to consolidate on these two positions. And why does research matter, right? And I mean, why does thought leadership matter? Because one thing, and particularly in this day and age, right, where data analytics, your ability to look at information and start gleaning insights from the data and information that are presented to you, I think that's what is necessary in order to start making informed policy decisions, right? And I believe that bringing in that academic rigor in terms of thought, bringing in the insights from practitioners and policymakers who are out there doing the things on a day-to-day basis, it's an amalgamation of all of these that is then going to produce output for everyone, right? I mean, for policymakers, for businesses, for society at large, as well as academics, as we improve the things that we work on and the stuff that we teach in our classrooms, right? And I believe that this symbiotic relationship that we are trying to foster needs to be strengthened, right? And just to kind of elaborate on this idea and maybe give a little more of a concrete example, right? I mean, and since Shri Hardeep Singh Puri ji is here with us, I mean, think of a scheme like the Udan Scheme, right, which is the Ministry of Civil Aviation's incredible project for trying to improve regional air connectivity in the country. And if you talk to folks, and if you try to understand how they went about creating this kind of a policy for the country, right? I think an incredible statement that was made by the Minister of State for Civil Aviation when we were talking to him. This was Mr. Jain Sinha, right? He said that, see, we are in the process of trying to make policy that will enable markets in this country, right? And I think that was a very thought-provoking statement, because how does one go about making these kinds of policy decisions that then enable businesses to come in, and in this case airline businesses to come in, and yet have market forces work for you, right? Because you don't want to just create a simple subsidy and say, hey, you know what, we are just going to help the airlines pick up these markets. No, you want to create and think through how will you get them to participate in such a scheme? How will you get the airlines to participate in such a scheme? And do it willingly, and yet make it a self-sustaining business in the long run, right? And while I personally wasn't involved, in the development of the scheme directly, and though I've been reading about it and trying to study it, I have been very recently involved in writing up an assessment report about the scheme with officials from the Ministry of Civil Aviation, in particular the Joint Secretary Susha Padi, right over there, and some of my colleagues here at ISB. And I think that kind of a collaboration which comes to bear, right, because of we being in academia, trying to look at things from a more rigorous perspective, yet validating some of the thought processes that policymakers are involved in, I think is a nice example of how such a symbiotic relationship can actually flourish in this country, and we can get outcomes that are really desirable for our economy, right? I mean, there are many more examples, some that I've been involved in at ISB, some, my colleagues have been involved, and I hope, during the health session, you might have heard some of my colleagues talk about, some of the initiatives that they are involved in particular, during the COVID-19 times. But, I mean, that's what, I think ISB and fora like these, will foster, and I hope that this continues into the future, right? Now, finally, I would like to mention, on a slightly orthogonal issue, that it's not just about research and engaging. I mean, in particular, if I look at, the kind of audience we have today, largely from the diplomatic community, right? It's also for us to learn from policymakers and diplomats like yourself, right? And this is, really enhancing our skills and our pedagogical tools and the materials that we bring in class, and training the next set of students who eventually will find their way into these positions within government or society. And one such example, that comes to mind is. Think of how does one improve communication and negotiation skills, right, which are very crucial to the kinds of jobs that you all are involved in. And to me, but that's not just restricted to your domain, because I think these skills are very essential for business leaders and other members of society too. And I think learning from your experiences and bringing that learning into the class, and be it through simple by getting you as guest lecturers, or getting you to come and talk to our students, or even working with you, writing case studies about this, creating pedagogical material for our classrooms, can be a great way of, for schools like us, as well as our students, to learn, right? And I'm pretty sure, this would also be enriching for you, because you will get to interact with, young minds and young folks who probably think very differently about similar issues. And I can almost see that, if we can leverage this capability and, build these closer relationships, this can only help the education and our classrooms going forward, right? So personally, I find these kinds of fora very enriching, ways for us to communicate our ideas, to listen to what you have, the people in the government, in public policy, in the diplomatic circles, things that you work on and understand from your experiences. And once again, right, I mean, I think these kinds of workshops like the one that we are doing today, the Deccan Dialogues, are ways of interacting and bringing all of us together on one common platform, both to discuss, debate, and educate us on issues of immense importance to the nation. So thank you for the organizing committee for making this happen, and thank you to all of you who participated in this in these sessions here at Deccan Dialogues. And I wish you all the very best. And I hope to listen to the Honorable Minister and the Ambassador in this session.
Thank you, Professor Milind, for your encouraging words of wisdom. Thank you. Friends, it gives me immense pleasure in welcoming the keynote speaker of our valedictory session, Shri Hardeep Singh Puri ji, Honorable Minister for Housing and Urban Affairs, Independent Charge, Civil Aviation, Independent Charge, and Minister of State for Commerce and Industry, Government of India. A former diplomat who served as permanent representative of India to the United Nations. During a career spanning almost 4 decades and with an extensive experience in multilateral diplomacy, Shri Puri ji has authored several books, research papers, and journals. Honorable Minister, over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Rajshekhar. I also want to thank my friend, Minister K.T. Ramarao. I believe that he has very kindly agreed, or perhaps acquiesced, I don't know which is the right term, in my taking a turn to speak before him. That is because I have, unfortunately, a program which is so tightly packed that even a slight overrun in my schedule will mean delays down the road. And I'm sure KTR will not mind. He and I are collaborators in many projects. And if I'm derailing his project in any way, I will make up to him. Let me start by placing on record my appreciation to the Indian School of Business and my, I should not say my Ministry of External Affairs, even though I spent 39 years there, as our host is pointing out. But I should share with you a secret. Those are the 39 years I spent in the Ministry of External Affairs working myself, because I was also born into the MEA, which means that when I was born in 1952, my father was already a member of the ministry. So if you have to look at extent and duration, I perhaps will figure in any number of people, a small list of people who've had a long association with the Ministry of External Affairs. And I continue to admire what my young friends, the diplomats today, are doing, the innovation. And I think the tie-up with research institutions, the collaborative efforts with the Indian School of Business and other similar institutions is both for the overall purpose and objectives of diplomacy, and it also augurs well, because I think learning is a two-way process. And the previous speaker, the Professor Sohani, was mentioning that how the business professionals and those who are doing the cerebral work in the institute can learn from diplomats. Equally, diplomats continue to learn from those who are in the actual business of, carrying out economic activity. Therefore, let me start by trying to share with you my perception of what COVID-19 as a pandemic has done. And I speak straight from the heart. I was ambassador and permanent representative to the United Nations in Geneva. I also later I was ambassador and permanent representative in New York. I have some knowledge, a little more than a nodding acquaintance. Let me say I have some working knowledge on how the international community responds to pandemics. I was around when we had to deal with H1N1, swine flu. I was around when we had to deal with Ebola. And I also know something about SARS. Each of them was of serious concern to the international community, but I think COVID-19 is different. And I think COVID-19, if at all it has to resonate on any template, reminds us of the Spanish flu of 1918 in terms of the devastation it has caused. So whenever you write the history of the world that we live in, contemporary history, there will be a pre-COVID period and there will be a post-COVID period. And I'm not mentioning this pre-COVID and post-COVID in terms of how we deal with this pandemic. I'm the eternal optimist those of you who have worked with me, and I think especially in the Ministry of External Affairs, we have individually, we have collectively navigated through a number of difficult challenges. And I have no doubt that we will come out much stronger after COVID-19 as a country and as a society. But I think that's important not only to meet the challenge of COVID-19, it is important for another reason. Because the overall struggle that takes place between man and nature and the devastation that the human being and the human race are causing to the nature, to the ecology, the one we live in, makes it entirely possible that COVID-19 will not be the last occasion that we have to face a challenge of this kind. And therefore, it brings us back to some home truths, which I shall come back to, which are part of my speaking notes. But let me just say that we should have seen COVID-19 coming. Now, I know I'm making a strong statement. I could be challenged. I would be asked, what makes you think? Well, there are people, including my friend Nassim Nicholas Taleb, the author of the famous, Anti-Fragile and other famous books, Black Swan, who had predicted it. I mean, I don't think he had predicted COVID-19 exactly in the form of COVID-19, but he had talked about us getting ready for an event of this kind. Now, as we prepare to meet this challenge, and which I think in India we have successfully we managed quite well so far. We were one of the first countries in the world, thanks to the Prime Minister's inspirational leadership and his ability to see the shape of things to come. We were one of the first countries in the world to ban flights, Air India, from China, normal flights. The private sector, Indigo, followed 2 days later. This was, I think, as early as March of this thing. I was addressing a public meeting when I used the word pandemic, and a bright researcher sitting behind me said, "Sir, the WHO is not using the term yet, and you are calling it a pandemic." Well, we are learning. I saw all the ingredients of a pandemic. SARS had a mortality rate of 17%. In the case of COVID, we brought it down to 1.4%. We are testing more than 1 million people a day. Our recovery rate is very good. Our positive testing rate, all that means we are on top of the situation, even though we will have, I think, a few weeks to deal with the current wave. What are the lessons that we have learned from this pandemic and the disruption it has caused? Well, I would say the first is that nations need to have robust healthcare infrastructure and public health emergency protocols in place. This, without doubt, is the most important takeaway that we have. I remember when I was ambassador to Brazil, I was writing to the central government advocating that at least 3% of the budget should be set aside for healthcare. But it's very easy for an ambassador to make a recommendation, but not so easy for a finance minister to make the allocation. But I think COVID has driven home the point that we must have robust healthcare infrastructure and public health emergency protocols in place to tackle a global public health crisis on this scale that has the potential to disrupt all chains of function. The second one takeaway I think that we have is that countries that are globalized, and I think most of us are, they must not, and they must ensure they don't become overly dependent on any single nation or region for the supply of essential goods and services. And this is a risk that has to be mitigated. De-risking and diversification of supply chains has become an unequivocal call for nations worldwide. What has COVID-19 done to us? How does this compare with the other global shifts that have taken place? I could cite the fall of the Berlin Wall, the 9/11 terror attacks, to 2008 financial crisis, to name only a few. But I think in many respects, COVID-19 is sui generis. That is, it is one of a kind. Now, when I was a young diplomat with something like 7 years of service, our concept of trade was essentially dealing with the importation of goods. We were having disputes with our major trading partner like the United States on things like industrial fasteners and sanitary casting. Today, when we talk about trade, we are talking about host of other issues. We added services to the world of trade and goods. Today, we talk about data security, health, biosecurity, supply chain resilience, and national security. The world, I think, it doesn't matter where the virus came from, whether it came from the wet markets of Wuhan or it came from elsewhere. Let's be absolutely clear that this is going to alter the way we live. That's why I call it a pre-COVID and a post-COVID time. And some of the notes I made for this interactive session with you, one is that the future of work has become the present, with millions working from home to ascertain a healthy and safe working environment. Will this become the norm? The fact that all of us are virtually connected, that we are not physically present? I really don't. But I can tell you, the need for mobility cannot be underestimated. I want to share with you my experience of the Ministry of Civil Aviation. As I said, we were one of the countries which went into an early lockdown, a very effective lockdown. From 23rd March, we were almost in total lockdown condition. We opened, and that gave us the wiggle space to the time in which to sort out and rectify the gaps in our health infrastructure. And I can tell you with confidence, the fact that we can make 1 million PPE masks or manufacture ventilators on a large scale is because we bought ourselves time and got this sorted out. We were the pharmacy of the world even earlier, providing generics. But today we stepped into a different thing. Today, when the vaccine becomes available in a few months' time, I believe we will be one country where, whether it's a Serum Institute or other such institutes, which will be making the vaccine by the millions every day to provide to the world. But there are few things which I think we need to understand. When it comes to a choice between life and livelihood, the choices are not easy. It was very easy to make the choice on 23rd March to go in for a complete lockdown and to value life, to place a premium on life over everything else. But very soon we realized, and rightly so, that if you don't also open up economic activity, then you are going to cause disruption and devastation of a similar kind, but through a different method. So we opened up. Let me give you the statistics on civil aviation. We opened civil aviation on 25th May, a good 2 months and 2 days after we had completely locked down. We opened on 25th May with 30,000 passengers in a day. 2 days or 3 days ago, I think just before Diwali, we carried 225,000. And with the scale at which we are opening up in a calibrated manner, we already opened up 70% capacity. I've already encouraged my colleagues to look at 80%. I am confident that by the end of the year, by 31st December, or soon thereafter means a week or 2 weeks thereafter, we will be back to pre-COVID levels. But that requires, in turn, that we continue to maintain the existing safety protocols, we strengthen them, and we are able to adapt. That requires both professional people coming together to set up those protocols, but it also requires a degree of self-discipline. And I must share with you that as a proud Indian, I have to say, when it comes to disregarding protocols, we do quite well on a global scale of people who are less than fully disciplined. Well, I think it may be a function of democracy. I've seen protests taking place in the United States, another robust democracy, where people resorted to physical protest in order to register their voices against the lockdown. Well, I can tell you, there is nothing more serious, that requires real serious introspection than the need for discipline and to follow protocols. And I don't think the story is over. We need technology. We need all the help we can. And I want to come to you because I think one of the things which we should have realized is that the COVID pandemic came to us at a time when technology was receiving a quantum boost. You know, we were at the cusp of the fourth industrial revolution. We are today, we can say that research is taking place on artificial intelligence, on, all other aspects of this frontier breaking technology. And we are applying that in our cities. I can tell you from my other portfolio, housing and urban affairs, the integrated command and control centers, which are there in more than 50% of the, more than 50 of the 100 cities, they use this technology for crisis management. Technologies like GIS, mapping, telemedicine services are being deployed to assess urban centers across the country to tackle COVID-19. The Atmanirbhar concept, process is not likely to, it will most definitely lead to the emergence of a stronger India. Very often my liberal friends who deal with trade policy in a manner which I no longer find easy to understand, their idea of trade liberalization is allowing the foreign economic entity to enter India and you opening up the economy. I'm all for opening up the economy, but like a very famous journalist who was a friend of mine when I was very young, who told me once, you know, I like to be had, but on my terms. I mean, there has to be give and take. Atmanirbharta is crucial because when we come out of this, we must be able not only to ensure that our hospitals, emergency rooms, the provision of equipment and supplies, PPEs, ventilators, the training of healthcare professionals is world class. And I believe it's achieving that. Equally, Atmanirbharta is not about an inward looking trade policy. No, Atmanirbharta is about self-resilience. It is about us being able to take our rightful place in the community of nations on the basis of what we put there. Let me give you a few examples again from one of my ministries. When the pandemic broke out, under Lifeline Udan, the professor spoke to the Udan scheme. Let me refer to the Lifeline Udan scheme. The Lifeline Udan scheme resulted in Air India and our other carriers bringing in 1,500 tons of medical supplies and equipment from outside. We were able, through Lifeline Udan, to distribute 947 tons of essential medical supplies and medical equipment within the country. And we exported more than 30 tons of this, and we are continuing to do that. Udan is pre-COVID. Udan is designed as a scheme to service underserviced, unserviced airports, airstrips, which have existed from the time of the Second World War. Lifeline Udan was the creation of my colleagues in this ministry who were able to adapt to the changing environment with great speed and great innovative thinking. We are not stopping here. I'm not going to share a secret, but it is well known. In the budget speech, there was a reference to Krishi Udan. We are on the verge of taking that forward as well. You know, when I go into parliament, mostly, let's say 10 years ago, what would have happened when a minister goes into parliament? Most people come and said, railway gadi, train should pass through my town. Today, every MP that I meet has a demand for an airport, if not in his capital, all the capitals are well served, in his district and even preferably sub-district. And they want these airports to be international. The point that the professor was making about, you know, connectivity is a great multiplier. You produce connectivity. I'll give you an example. I was in Singapore, wearing the hat of my third ministry, a Minister of State in Commerce and Industry, I met the CEO of Singapore Airlines. He asked me, he said, look, we need more flights. So since I was only a month old or 2 months old, I don't know, I didn't have these statistics on my fingertips. I asked him, sir, how many flights do you have to India? He said, we have 500 flights to 18 cities in India. I nearly fell off my chair. I said, how many do you want? He didn't answer the question. He said, sir, with China, we have 800 flights a week from 36 Chinese cities. Well, that also set me thinking. And one of the things that I am committed to do as Minister of Civil Aviation, I want to bring the aviation GDP back to India. If the value of if you invite me to the Indian School of Business, I'll give you a proper 45-minute discourse on it. But just now, since the time is short, let me give you some small economic statistics. The value of traffic between India and the United States is roughly $7 billion annually. How much do Indian carriers get out of that traffic? A mere 17%. And it's not as if the American carriers are getting the remaining 83%. I'm not going to say who's getting it, but I see no reason why an Indian flagship carrier or the private sector carrier should not be earning more money flying passengers. I mean, these are what I call distorted business models. Why do I call them distorted? Because something went wrong. Now, distorted business models, let me share from my days as a trade negotiator. I was a young first secretary. I had to deal with something called the multi-fiber arrangement that governed the international trade in textiles and clothing. When I went there, I was dumbstruck. I was a total of what? I must have been 27, 28 years old. And my first lessons in trade are very interesting. We grew up, even those of us who were not students of economics, to say that international trade is about free trade. The first lesson which hits you with international trade is not about free trade. It is about managed trade. Because all the sectors of export interest to developing countries, whether they be agriculture or textiles, they were taken outside the free trade rules of the GATT, the predecessor instrument to the World Trade Organization, called the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, and they were put in a derogation from the free trade rules called the MFA, the multi-fiber arrangement. What did it do? It produced arrangements between the supplying countries, which were developing countries, and the importing countries, which were the developed countries. All right? Similar restraints had been imposed on Japan earlier, but Japan grew and got rid of the restraint. What did we do? We happily accepted those things, and we were very happy. It came to such a distortion that when the multi-fiber arrangement had to be undone as part of the Uruguay round of trade negotiations, many of my colleagues were saying, "Ye to bada kharab ho jayega. This will lead to disrupt." Yeah, because they had become so used to quotas and numerical limits set on their exports that we suddenly discovered that many people were utilizing the quota because there was rent seeking going on. Now, but it also produced distortion. Countries which were neither producers of cotton, countries which were neither having a history of textiles and clothing manufacture, they suddenly became textiles and clothing hubs, including in our neighborhood. Now, again, since we are amongst diplomats, I'm not to go further than that. But when the multi-fiber arrangement was coming to an end, what we should have done, and I blame the previous government for that, because my government, Prime Minister Modi's government, took the corrective steps, but only after it came in 2014. We should have invested heavily in the modernization of this sector, in the import of plant and equipment, so that the post-MFA period, we could have risen and been competing. I have heard people argue that till we set up and become much more competitive in the manufacturing sectors, all these other arrangements are no news to us. This is what Atmanirbharta will do. I think Atmanirbharta is designed that we will become self-reliant, we will improve our manufacturing sector, and we're doing it at a pace which is truly astronomical. Let me go back to where we are on the revival of the economy. I deal with, as I said, 3 ministries where I look at these statistics very carefully. If you look at automobile sector, if you look at other forms of this thing, you look at real estate, I think my colleague and friend, Amitabh Kant, who is the CEO of Niti Aayog, put it very well. And he documents it in an interview. The fact of the matter is the economy is now firing on all 6 cylinders. We are almost back to pre-COVID levels. And we are today in a position where we can turn around and say that we have been able to deal with this emergency. Yes, we will need to keep the protocols in place. We will also need to ensure that we are not vulnerable further as we go along. Much of our festivities, I say this as a reasonably religious person myself, they can become super spreader events. But I think if we are able to navigate our way past this, let me quote to you what the Prime Minister highlighted recently. He said, Atmanirbharta is not a vision alone. It is a well-planned economic strategy that brings to the table returns with reality, demand with democracy, stability with sustainability, and growth with a green approach. I don't think anyone could have found a better way of describing Atmanirbharta. And to the Prime Minister, who is probably one of the world's most effective communicators, he has put it beautifully. And I spend a few minutes reiterating this because some of our friends who work in institutes like yourself might sometimes turn around and saying this is not conventional wisdom. It isn't, but that is what will be the conventional wisdom in terms of our going forward. We have taken a number of steps. We have steadily risen in the ease of business index. We have recently undertaken labor and tax reform to make the country a more attractive manufacturing hub. We have leapfrogged to 63rd global rank in the ease of doing business of the World Bank, a jump of 14 places. In some of my housing and urban affairs ministry, we have in fact leapfrogged something like on construction permits. We have come back. We have come from 143rd place to 18 or 20th. So, I mean, no matter where you look, things are moving. We are committed to bringing our economic capacities and harnessing them in a more prominent role, both for global business and trade and innovation. We have taken a number of steps recently. On 11th November, the Union Cabinet gave the approval to introduce the production-linked incentive, PLI scheme, in 10 key sectors, such as for enhancing India's manufacturing capabilities and enhancing exports. These key sectors include advanced technology cell batteries, electronics, technology products, automobiles and auto components, pharmaceutical, drugs, telecom and networking products, textile products, food products, high efficiency solar PV modules, white goods, air conditioners and LED with specialty steel. I have a number of other items which listing. I will put this out in a statement subsequently. I just want to conclude with 2 or 3 broad indicators. When we became an independent country in 1947, 17% of India lived in urban spaces. But 17% on a total population, which in 1947 was around 350 million or so. By the year 2030, when the United Nations completes the 2030 agenda or the work on the Sustainable Development Goals, 40% of our population, or something like 600 million Indians, will be living in urban spaces. To cater to this growing urban population, we need to, and this is a McKinsey study, these figures are not mine, we need to make 600 to 800 million square meters of urban space every year. This is equal to 1 Chicago every year. 70% of the India of 2030 still remains to be built. It's in the process. And if we had more time, I could tell you what all we are doing in Delhi. You know, if Delhi's population in next census ends up at 2 crores, about 70% of it is being rebuilt. Unauthorized colonies, we are giving a Malkana Haq or a title. We are Jahan Juggi Wahi Makan, you know, schemes like land pooling, and I could go on, a new Central Vista and so on. On the construction permit, which I mentioned, we have moved from 185th position to 27. And this online visit globally, and this online building permission is now practiced in 2,050 Indian cities. Our credit rating for 469 Amrut cities was done for the first time to evaluate their financial capacities. 163 cities were found to be investable grade. 306 cities were to improve. Just now, I think Lucknow has raised 200 crores in Bombay in the stock exchange, and several other cities in UP are to follow. Urban transport with 700 kilometers of operational network in 18 cities, another 900 kilometers in the pipeline in 27 cities. The metro operations are moving ahead with great speed. Various metro rail components like rolling stock, signaling and telecom systems, electrical and electromechanical system, and civil engineering structures have been standardized, presenting these companies with a unique opportunity to invest. Where are we going in civil aviation? Last year, we dealt with pre-COVID 345 million passengers, both footfalls, arrivals and departures put together. I can say with confidence that in the coming few years, civil aviation will get a boost. We're getting what, another 100 new airports? Another 100 new airports. Our fleet size today should be around 750. I know airlines, when they come across a pandemic like this, they try to curtail the size of their fleet orders. But I can say with 7% penetration, which means out of every 100, only 7 Indians fly, and a 17% rate of growth, which we experienced pre-COVID at one time, we will move from 750, not to the 1200, which everybody says, but to 2000 aircraft, and we will do it pretty quickly. The advent of, there's a massive opportunity for investors across the aviation ecosystem, and aviation is a critical driver of economic growth across airports, airlines, ground handling, drones, ancillary services, manufacturing and maintenance, repairs, operation. Let me conclude finally by saying, whether it is housing, where you see not only the beginnings, but very, very prominent activity in the housing sector, whether you see civil aviation, we are coming back to pre-COVID levels. But I think hopefully before too long, we will be able to reposition ourselves as an economic player in the global supply chain, and with our natural advantages, labor force, which is skilled, a technically skilled labor force, we offer cost-effective alternative destinations to de-risk and diversify global supply chain. And I think the various initiatives that the government has taken are creating opportunities that businesses both in India and outside can utilize. Even during this unprecedented time, there has been massive investment by global technology majors in India. We have received over $20 billion of FDI during this year. Google, Amazon, Mubadala Investments have announced long-term plans for India. This is a testament to the potential and opportunity that India has to offer. Green infrastructure supplemented by technology solutions will be a critical driver of growth in the next few decades. To this end, the Modi government is working towards creating the much needed interlinkages domestically and internationally. The most potent example of this is India has entered the pandemic with 2 manufacturers of N95 masks, only to later go on to sending critical medical supplies to over 150 countries, more than half of which were grants to our partners in the developing world. Herein lies the essence of the Prime Minister's call for Atmanirbharta for an Atmanirbhar Bharat, a strong, self-reliant India that builds its capacities to effectively play its role as a force for good in the world. Thank you very much. I also apologize. I think I have shifted from being a diplomat to somebody who is now in public life, and maybe I've also exceeded my time limit by a few minutes. I seek your indulgence. Thank you once again, all of you, for giving me this opportunity, MEA and the Indian School of Business. And my friend KTR, you can encash this check at your next time when you come to Delhi. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sandeep. First of all, I would like to begin congratulating the ISB, the Indian School of Business, Hyderabad, for organizing this very useful, very insightful dialogue, despite all the challenges. It's not easy to do this in the current context of the pandemic, where you run into all kinds of challenges. But I would like to heartily congratulate everybody at the ISB and also our colleagues and our friends from the technology domain for making this possible. ISB is not only a center of excellence, but also personally for me, it's my alma mater. I'd undergone my mid-career training about 4 years ago. I would very fondly recall that the training inputs that we received were absolutely top-notch, world-class, and the kind of interactions that we could have with the finest faculty members was truly useful. We had, in course of today, we had very useful, although 4 sessions, much curtailed because of the virtual manner that we are organizing. We began with beginning with, for example, Honorable External Affairs Minister's inaugural keynote, that he set the context that we don't want in the government that the diplomatic policy is made only from the capital, only from the bureaucratic government confines. So that sets the stage that we would like to make it inclusive through dialogue outside the capital. And Hyderabad is a very appropriate location. I'm very glad that this 3rd edition is happening today. And in the context of the pandemic, where Hyderabad is emerging as the pharmacy capital of the world, thanks to very timely scaling up of operations, distinguished panelists Sangeeta Reddy and others had underlined that we produce almost 2/3 of vaccines of the world, and we greatly contribute to make vaccines affordable for large populations across the globe. So Hyderabad is very apt location. Not only that Hyderabad is a pharmaceutical capital, but also it has enabled this year, during the context of the pandemic, for India to emerge as a net healthcare provider. Honorable Minister Puri has also mentioned that during this last 1 year, we have been able to share our developmental experience, dispatch medical missions, and also dispatch pharmaceutical supplies to about 150 countries, and almost 2/3 of them as grant. As External Affairs Minister has put it, the present context is that we should be confident at home and cooperative abroad. So that is the context that we set upon. And when we look around, we also have great many opportunities on the international stage. Come 1st January 2021, India will be sitting on the United Nations Security Council. That gives us, one more opportunity to shape the global agenda, the discussions as to how the world can develop in a more equitable, more inclusive, more sustained manner. And also already India is the chair for the WHO, World Health Organization Executive Board. It's very providential that India assumes this important chairmanship during the pandemic. And We are also shortly going to assume the chairmanship of G20, Shanghai Cooperative Organization, and BRICS summits. So all these provide us enough opportunities to realize our age-old philosophy, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, that we envision the world as but one single family for all of us to closely cooperate. And the pandemic has just underlined that need. In course of today, we have discussed very many ideas, very useful insights. For example, that manufacturing needs to be scaled up, and services where we already, for example, in information technology and IT-enabled services market, we're already about 40% of the global market, and digitization. So in these, how to go about converting the present context of crisis into an opportunity to leapfrog. Distinguished panelists have put it that trust is going to be the new currency. In the place of formal free trade agreements, now we're going to see more and more global value chains. In global value chains, trust is going to be the currency. Say how trustworthy we are when compared to our nearest competitor. That's going to determine our place in being globally competitive in trade. And speakers have highlighted important points like female participation in labor force and enhancing productivity of the economy and reducing the time and cost delays of infrastructure projects. So why I'm enlisting some of these points are as a government functionary, we would be more interested that this dialogue, which has put together both the academia, industry, and the policymakers together, can actually help develop policy inputs to modify and give proper direction in a manner that enhances the national interest. So wherever there is the intersection between international diplomatic functioning and the economy, we'd be very happy to collect inputs emerging from today's dialogue. I would request the ISB to help us in that direction. Already, Mr. Munjal has given a very practical suggestion that they would like to develop a Center of Excellence for Business and Diplomacy. I would like to take it on hand and process the idea so that in the 20th year of ISB, we can closely collaborate in this one more major milestone. And I would like to most sincerely thank, beginning with External Affairs Minister Jaishankar, for setting the tone for the dialogue, and also Mr. Hardeep Puri Saab, both my distinguished colleagues, and Ambassador Shyam Saran and various other panelists. I would like to apologize that I was a little under the weather, that I couldn't go to office today, that I don't sport the standee that all my other distinguished panelists have. But thank you very much for bearing with me. And I would like to most sincerely thank all my colleagues at the ISP, Sandeep and Guru, and my colleagues at the States Division. When I could not, for the last few hours, could not take part, they have shouldered greater responsibility. We look forward to the next dialogue, hopefully that it shall be in physical form, which is more lively and more interactive, more dialogue way. Thank you very much for this opportunity. Thank you for your kind attention.
Now I request Shri DNV Kumar Guru, Director of External Relations, to propose the order.
Friends, we come to the end of what has been, I think, under these circumstances, all of us are definitely used to a few things. One is sitting in front of screens. Since March, I think that's become a pretty much a normal norm for all of us. But the other thing is, as we also saw, and I think this conference was no exception, is people muting themselves but going on speaking. I think we also had that today as well. But it's a 5-hour, close to 5 hours of a marathon conference that we've had. So I do want to keep my part of this very, very brief. My job is to thank people, and I want to sort of try and see if I can do that as quickly but as comprehensively as possible. First of all, I want to thank all of you, the audience, for joining us. Like I said, it isn't easy being part of this, but I do want to, and I just got this numbers just like a few minutes ago. I had asked my colleagues to give me the chit. We had close to 1,921 registrations, out of which we have had 1,288 logged in just a few minutes ago as I received this piece of paper. I think that's very impressive. I want to congratulate all of you and applaud you for sort of being part of this important dialogue, because oftentimes we think of why we do these things. It's because we want to create and respond and cater to a certain audience who are interested in discussions around foreign policy and external engagement and trade. And I hope you found this useful. I definitely learned a lot through the day, and I hope you did as well. The fact that all of you have stayed this long is a testament to the fact that this has been of some value. So thank you very much. I do want to make one mention, which is personally gratifying to the team and myself, is that of these 1,921 registrations, about 450 of those were people who have attended either Deccan Dialogue 1 or Deccan Dialogue 2. So Ambassador Rajshekhar Garu, to your point, I think this is a proof that there's an audience in cities like Hyderabad who definitely value something like this. And I'm sure with your support next year, we'll make it as an in-person event and continue to sort of grow this further. I want to thank all the speakers. You've thanked the honorable ministers. I sort of will join you in thanking the honorable ministers, but also every speaker. We've had 2 ministers. We've had the past president of CII, the president of FICCI, the president of NASCOM. We've got former foreign secretary, diplomats. We've got academics, and then media. This is in terms of as well-rounded as any speaker panel can be. This is, I think, we have been able to put together. In these gloomy days of pandemic, there are some bright spots. One of this is that you are able to get speakers fairly easy. Relatively easy. I wouldn't sort of say fairly easy. Relatively easy. It's by no means a statement that it's very easy to get people. Everybody is busy, but I think that's been one advantage. So I want to sort of thank all the speakers for joining us and sharing your insights and ideas. I do want to thank media who've covered us today. The news is already out as we speak because it's a digital world and things are already out there. Today is actually the National Press Day, so I want to offer my compliments to all our friends from the media. For the wonderful work that you continue to do in a democracy as vibrant as ours, and especially for your support to ISB and to Deccan Dialogue. MEA, I think this is only, you see there's 2 logos everywhere, and that's because Deccan Dialogue is incomplete without MEA. It's sort of, this is here because MEA is with us. I think I want to start off with Ambassador Rahul Chabra, the Secretary, Economic Relations MEA, for his support, and as the chief sponsor of this initiative, Ambassador Rajshekhar Garu for, as the head of the States Division, who's just recently come into this office. But, I think one of the first meeting I remember, he said, you guys know what you're doing. So something that's not broken, I don't want to fix it. I think it's so reassuring to work with people like you, sir. So thank you very much. You've been exemplary in your support and very encouraging. I do want to make a special mention of Rajesh Kumar ji in your team for his wonderful work and for all the heavy lifting that he has done. The branch secretariat in Hyderabad, I think, there are MEA's presence in our city. I want to thank Vishnu Reddy, who's just left and in fact has joined a new division in Delhi today. I want to thank him for his support and partnership through the first 2 editions. Ravi Aisola, who was the earlier head of branch secretariat, for laying the foundation for the partnership between MEA and ISB. I want to also thank Telangana government for their support. As Sandeep mentioned, unfortunately, due to a commitment that is beyond his control as well, Honorable Minister KTR Garu couldn't join us today. But I hope, since there's a plan for a Videsh Bhavan in Hyderabad, I hope in the not too distant future, Deccan Dialogue will be actually, we will be able to hold the Deccan Dialogue at Videsh Bhavan, and this should be one of those tripartite thing between MEA, Telangana government and ISB. So that's one of the aspirations. Many people have supported and contributed towards this. Sunny Side Up is our design partner. All the wonderful creatives and everything that you've been doing is thanks to them. I want to thank the team. This is the third year in a row they're supporting us. There are many people at ISB I need to thank. Dean Srivastava for his support. He's been someone who has believed in the fact that ISB should be experimental and unique in terms of trying to create impact. It's not very normal for a business school to focus on diplomacy. Universities do, but a business school probably not as much. But I think he's been providing his support wholeheartedly and with his personal commitment as well. So I want to thank the Dean. I want to thank Professor Milind Sohoni as the Deputy Dean for his continued support, Professor Chandan Chowdhury, Professor Sarang Dev, who spoke today, but also all our faculty colleagues and other colleagues at ISB. Many other people very quickly are, digital world, the first people you have to thank are people from the IT and AV teams, because all of this is running smoothly because, Zoom, they make Zoom work. Let me put it that way. So I think that's one. Our partner, vConflex, for, their support, commercials, finance, operations, horticulture, and so on. We've had 2 tree plantations virtually here, but actually the real plants are already in Hyderabad campus. So if you ever visit the campuses, you can see the 2 plants planted by both the ministers are already there. My colleagues from the marketing communications team, Lakshmi, TAV, Sirisha, Raghu, Mudita, Samuel, and Hema Mani for their sort of support. Lastly, the team that I have the fortune of leading, which is the team which has put together this event. You see Sandeep on screen, Prashant, Sridhar, Naman, Nagaraj for their wonderful work. They worked through the Deepavali weekend, but today I'm sure they'll be happy that it was all worth it. So I want to thank all of them. One of the things that we've always maintained, I may have missed out a few, so please pardon me. That's all. That blame is mine. One of the things that we always want to do is to start on time and end on time. So we started at 11 a.m. I think we are just about to hit 4 p.m. and we are ending now. So I think that is something that, because I think the Honorable Minister earlier mentioned about on the indices of indiscipline, we are sort of, world standards of a not so desirable this thing. And he was referring to it in a different context. He said where, in the civil aviation thing. I do think that that's an important thing for us to do. In a large conference like this, there are multiple players. But to all of you again, thank you very much. I hope you all had a good Deepavali festival and in the different ways in which we celebrate the festival today. And to those celebrating New Year, I wish you all a very happy New Year. Thank you very much and look forward to seeing you in 2021. Thank you.